if that's not what she believes, you know, maybe she should put a little bit more effort into editing her content before she publishes it. So this video from Raleigh Link 14 is a response to my video, which was a response to her video, which was a response to that vegan teacher's video. Normally, I would not respond to a video like this simply because Raleigh does not even bother to watch my entire video, and she ends up misrepresenting me incredibly badly, partially because of that. But I wanted to because, number one, I'm getting a lot of comments from her viewers that makes it very clear that they did not watch my video at all and are simply regurgitating information from her. So just kind of want to clear the air there. And number two, I think her video is a really good example of someone's bias getting in the way of looking at something objectively. Obviously, I can't know for sure what's going on in her head, but I think that given what she gets wrong, just obvious stuff she gets wrong or doesn't even bother to look up, and her demeanor, just how angry she is with that vegan teacher and with me, that makes me think it's very likely what's going on here. She's just too close to horse riding and horse ownership to be able to look at the issue calmly and objectively.
I didn't react to her whole video. I could only get through that much of it. I'm sure there's things I missed, but you guys can go watch it if you want.
Maybe don't do that. She stopped right before I showed why her supposed evidence for why it's pain-free for horses if you ride them correctly, why that didn't actually support that claim. And she missed the really important part that might have kept her from misrepresenting me so badly in this video. I know it's easier to just react to stuff and not stop and reflect or even bother to watch the whole video, but it's ultimately, I think, dishonest because you're painting an inaccurate picture for your audience. Many people are not going to go back and watch the original video. They are relying on you to be accurate in your presentation of that video. Her cold open, the very first thing in her video, it's a snippet from later in the video, completely misrepresents my position. So the very first thing people see is not what I believe and not what I said in my video.
You don't know what you're talking about. It's ridiculous that you even made a video reacting to me. I'm so mad right now because if you're seriously gonna sit there and advocate for every single human being to just dump their horses back into the wild, first of all, that's illegal and nobody can do that. But second of all, you're asking for all those horses to have a death sentence. You know why? Because the BLM doesn't even want the 33,000 horses that we do have left in the wild to be in the wild. And they're rounding them up by the thousands every single month and sending them across borders to be slaughtered and killed.
Is it best to rewild horses? I don't know. Is it best to leave them fenced in and alone or to ride them? I don't know. And she doesn't know either. And we can't ask the horses. The conclusion as to whether or not some horses should be ridden is, I don't know. And no one else does either. Horses are probably harmed at least a little by being ridden and much more with badly fit saddle, etc. And they probably don't love it. At the same time, for a captive horse, it is possible that it adds so much enrichment to their lives that it makes up for that pain. It's trying to make the best of a bad situation, right? Of being bred into captivity and being someone's property. I'm not saying horses should be released into the wild, and I'm not saying they should not be ridden. I'm saying that it's complicated, and her dismissal of the issue without any argument really is just not productive. Also, as many of the commenters on her video noted, her BLM claim appears to be totally wrong. Now I'm going to continue the video as though it's not incorrect, just for the sake of argument, and because going into all of this and debunking the claim would really be like a video unto itself. But a lot of her argument against rewilding horses hinges on her BLM claim.
It always bothers me when people react to things and they say, well, I don't really know a lot about horses.
I don't know a whole lot about horses.
I don't really know a lot about this thing, like what she just said. Because, I mean, and I don't know, I haven't seen this video yet, so I'm not trying to prejudge, but 9 times out of 10, you just shouldn't be reacting to things that you don't really know a lot about. I've made that mistake many times in my life, and I've paid dearly for it because it ended up that I was completely wrong.
So the problem with this is that I don't ever claim to be a horse expert, and my argument doesn't hinge on that at all. It's a philosophical argument. When it comes to something that we're really invested in, we're probably not going to be the best person to listen to on that particular topic. There's a good chance that someone who really loves to do something like ride horses is going to ignore potential problems with that activity.
I actually completely disagree. I feel like I am the perfect person to respond to her.
Of course she thinks she's unbiased. That's like the point of biases, is that they're often invisible to those who hold them. Any amount of claimed expertise regarding like any topic doesn't contradict a bias. It's why scientific papers often have statements regarding potential bias, conflicts of interest. An actually unbiased person on horse riding would be someone who isn't involved at all, who doesn't ride horses, doesn't own horses. Someone like me. I don't care if horse riding is right or wrong. It doesn't affect me either way. So I'm more likely to just follow the evidence. If anything, I think I would be more likely to be biased towards horse riding being ethical, because that's like one less thing to worry about, right? I don't want it to be harmful for horses. Now, I think the best person to speak on this topic would be someone with the relevant expertise, right? Who knows a lot about horses and horse riding and horse ownership, and does not have a bias towards horse riding and horse ownership. But I don't know if a person like that exists. People with the relevant education in a niche interest like this, they're almost inherently going to be biased in favor of riding horses, because it's likely riding horses and having an interest in horses is what drove them to become an expert in riding horses in the first place. Despite that, I was able to find an expert, someone who does ride or did ride and has horses and is able to recognize their bias and acknowledge the unpleasant reality of domestication and the nuance around horse riding.
It's not right to breed horses so that way you can ride them. Then why are we breeding horses?
I don't see how that was confusing. People are breeding horses in order to ride them. That's probably wrong.
That's not true. A lot of horses are bred for non-riding purposes. So I think that that's also another hilarious thing she's saying. It just, again, goes to show that she doesn't know anything about the industry at all.
So I watched this like 5 times. It's very weird. I think this is just an example of be careful when you're just reacting to something. You're just hearing it one time and then talking, you may misunderstand. I was responding to what Raleigh said, which was only dealing with breeding to ride. Right? It's not okay to breed horses in order to ride them. And then Raleigh says, then why are we breeding them? AKA, we are breeding horses in order to ride them. If that's not what she believes, maybe she should put a little bit more effort into editing her content before she publishes it. I can't speak for that vegan teacher who may be against other, reasons for breeding, but it doesn't matter because that was not the point of the video. That was not the topic of discussion. It was only about horse riding and breeding for horse riding, for pet ownership.
I don't know if I was really clear or not, but I don't stand by breeding horses. I don't believe in breeding horses or any animal for that matter.
That's great. We're in agreement.
I think that it should be left up to the professionals, and I don't think people should be breeding horses if you don't know what you're doing, if you're just doing it irresponsibly for no fucking reason because you have a horse that you're like, oh, let me find this random ass dude on Craigslist who has $1,000 stud fee for some shitty horse and let me just breed it to my mare.
Oh. Saying you don't support breeding, but you support professionals breeding, then you support breeding. It doesn't matter if you only support certain breeding. If you support anyone breeding animals so that they can be ridden, so that they can become pets, then you support breeding animals. If someone believes that only professional dog breeds should breed dogs, they still support breeding.
Let's just be honest, people. Horses would not even be around if it wasn't for humans having a use for them.
And neither would all those big cats the Tiger King kept locked up in his zoo. There's a big difference between a breeder and a rescuer.
You totally misunderstood my point that I made. First of all, horses are totally completely different from keeping tigers and, wildlife. Horses are not wildlife. They've been domesticated for the last, several thousand years.
Their status as domesticated or not is mostly irrelevant. What matters and what is the same between horses and tigers is that they cannot be given the lives that they've evolved to lead in captivity. They're also both very large animals with expensive upkeep and environmental impact, and they're also both potentially very dangerous. And some of these criticisms apply to cats and dogs as well, domesticated cats and dogs, and like large dog breeds. A house cat, for instance, is never going to be able to roam as much as he or she would in the wild. And so, adopt, don't shop. it's clearly a problematic relationship. So bringing more of these animals into the world in order to have to live with that relationship is a huge moral issue. Whereas adopting an animal who already exists and who could not be released into the wild is much more of a gray area. There's nothing that's necessarily morally inconsistent between veganism and having a companion animal, but it becomes much more complicated when we have someone like Raleigh who says she's vegan but endorses breeding by professionals for entertainment purposes. I think it's reasonable to question whether or not she really understands veganism at all.
That's a really weird comparison that she's making because, I mean, anybody can go out and buy a horse and there's like, what, more than 2 million horse owners across the US? Like, owning a horse is really common. A lot of people own horses.
There are more horse owners than tiger owners, so owning horses is okay. That's not an argument.
You know, again, going back to the breeding, I don't believe that people should breed horses.
She literally said she thinks breeding should be left up to the professionals. In other words, that professionals should be breeding horses.
Horses are still around. We still have like millions of horses that are domesticated and in captivity in the US alone. So yeah, I mean, even if you adopt horses though, nobody is going to have a horse if they're not going to ride them. There's very few people who would own a horse at no benefit to themselves, which is what I was trying to say by that. Even adopting horses, this has nothing to do with breeding or adopting. Nobody is going to keep a horse, or very few people are going to keep horses at no benefit to themselves. And that was the point of what I was saying.
Yeah, I got that. My argument was that getting a benefit from an animal you saved from suffering and death and, ultimately gave a less shitty life to is very different from getting a benefit from an animal that you brought into that situation. Her argument only works if she opposes breeding. She doesn't, and so it doesn't. If dogs didn't like playing fetch very much, but humans liked it so much that it led to them saving dogs and keeping them from being killed in shelters, it might be a fair deal for the dog, at least better than the alternative. But that wouldn't excuse breeding dogs in order to make them play fetch. That's not altruism. It's certainly not vegan.
I mean, sure, there would still be wild horses, but domestic horses wouldn't even be a thing.
They're the same species. Like, we're not talking about extinction here, right? I mean, it's weird. Does she think that horses need to be in captivity? The wild horse populations today all came from ancestors who were once dominated by humans.
Oh my God. Girl, what are you saying? First of all, I completely understand that wild horses and domestic horses are the same species. I get that.
So she's not even making like an appeal to nature in the form of like species preservation. So why does she support breeding? Her horses are rescues.
And to clarify, all of my animals are adopted, and they've all been adopted my whole life.
Apparently she's always had rescues, so why? It doesn't seem like she has an incentive to support breeding.
Clearly you have no idea what you're talking about, because anybody who has been around a domesticated horse and a wild horse knows that they're completely different. Training a wild horse is incredibly different from training a domesticated horse, even a domesticated horse that has had no training. Why? Because one horse has been wild for millions and millions of years.
First, small behavioral differences like that are akin to differences like between dog breeds. Does she think every breed of dog that humanity's created has to be preserved? Or else we're violating like some sacrosanct natural order? I honestly don't know. I don't understand. Truly, I don't think she's thought it through very much because, again, she's not incentivized to do so. Just because we bred some lineage into existence doesn't mean that lineage has to be maintained for all of time. It's okay for unhappy animals not to be born, and it's okay for all horses to be wild. And if not, why not? Her only argument really is the BLM stuff, which is, again, not true. Second, millions of years? No. I literally linked to what I was talking about. All wild horses came from domesticated horse populations. It's not surprising that it only takes a few generations for those genes that make them like good domesticated horses to be lost or minimized in their populations. So much for being a horse expert.
Those horses are wired completely differently from the wild horses that have been untouched throughout all of history, even though at some point they may have been contacted by people.
May have been contacted by people? Is that Is that her attempt to just brush off domestication by, like, non-modern humans? Like, even if they were domesticated and dominated by ancient civilizations for hundreds or thousands of years, that's just contact. Again, what exactly is the argument here? I'm saying that there's no appeal to species extinction to maintain domesticated horses. She provides no evidence to contradict that, or any argument to support her original claim, which is that it would be bad to lose domesticated horses. This is the same argument anti-vegans make when talking about chickens and cows. Like, we just can't possibly have a world without domesticated food animals for some reason. I have a whole video on that for those interested.
If we stop breeding horses, like, let's take her utopian version, which is not going to happen. If everyone stopped breeding horses, then you would still be left with millions of horses for the next 30 or 40 years, because horses live a very long time that you need to take care of, and somebody needs to pay the vet bills for that animal. So what are you saying?
I'm saying that her position does not justify perpetuating the industry. You can have adopted horses and still ride them while agreeing that the ideal would be that these are the last horses ever born into captivity, and any future horses should be free, should be born in the wild. Just like when I cared for my cat, Sniff, who I loved dearly. I loved him very much and cared for him the best I could, while also acknowledging that he did not have anywhere close to the ideal life living in a 600 square foot apartment and never going outside, acknowledging the awful effect cats have on the environment and other sentient creatures, particularly those who do go outside. And I still believed breeding cats is wrong. You can excuse the benefit you get from a horse in exchange for paying for, vet care and taking care of the horse, but only if you don't support breeding. You can't justify bringing more horses into the world for entertainment with that reasoning. Literally, she stands against a future where every horse born is born free, is born in the wild with their herd. I don't like playing vegan police. I don't like calling people not vegan, but literally what she supports is not vegan. It's supporting breeding for entertainment is not vegan by definition. So I really encourage her, I'm not saying she's a fake vegan. I think she really just does not understand. I really encourage her to learn more about veganism and more about animal exploitation. It's not at all clear that this horse living in captivity has a better life than a wild horse would have.
Do I think that my horse would have a better life in the wild? Yes, absolutely. I don't know where she's pulling these narratives from, because I never said that. Like, I do fully agree and am completely aware that my horse would have a better life if he was not in captivity at all, because horses naturally roam 30 to 40 miles a day, which no matter what type of size pasture you have, or how big the land you have is that you put your horse on, or how much exercise you do, that horse is not going to be roaming 30 to 40 miles a day like what it would be in the wild. Okay, so do I think that my horse would have a better life in the wild? Absolutely.
This makes her stance like so much worse. Like, she believes wild horses lead better lives, and yet she still thinks it's okay to breed them into captivity.
If every single horse in a domestic situation was deprived food when they didn't behave, there would be no domesticated horses. Because there's not a single horse out there that has been domesticated, that has people that ride it or work with it or whatever, that behaves properly 24/7.
I don't think missing a meal is a death sentence. Like, I don't think that vegan teacher was saying that if they misbehave ever, then they're just never fed. And look, according to pro-equestrian sources, denying food does happen. The big thing that really neither side gets is that it doesn't have to be every horse. Permitting individuals to own horses inevitably means some will be neglected and abused.
Right, and I completely understand that, but permitting every single human being to be able to reproduce and have children pretty much means that some of those kids are probably going to be neglected and abused by their parents, okay?
So she thinks ending horse breeding is the same as ending human procreation. I mean, yeah, obviously there are equal impositions on human rights. Not letting people procreate versus not letting people own and breed others. Same thing. Obviously, society would collapse if we stopped breeding horses. I mean, we need the next generation of horses to become doctors and nurses and grocers. It's not like it's a niche entertainment industry that has little to no practical purpose in the modern world. Obviously, like human children, horses grow up and become emancipated and legally independent, free to live their own lives as they see fit. They aren't at all like slaves who have no hope for a future of freedom. Obviously, on average, horse owners love their horses as much as they love their own children and aren't at all more likely to abuse and neglect them. Maybe the legal right to have children and the legal right to breed horses are a little bit different. Maybe. The inevitable harm of horse breeding and ownership is so relevant not only because it's more likely, but because of the acute lack of material benefit in the world to maintaining this industry. Ending the industry will inconvenience tens of thousands of people and mean they'll have to find another way to earn money. There might be some argument for phasing it out gradually if you're super concerned about that small of an economic impact, let's be honest. But there's no good argument for defending and perpetuating the industry forever.
You are grasping at straws right now because the problem is not let's eliminate all of horse ownership. That's not the issue. That's not even a possibility.
Like how it wasn't possible to end feudalism or to prohibit ownership of humans, ownership of women, child slavery. Thinking something might be difficult is not a reason in and of itself to not do it.
The problem is, how do we further educate the equestrian community and the general public to better treat their horses and better communicate and better understand their animals?
And I think that's a noble goal, but I don't think it justifies being so hostile to those of us who disagree with you, particularly if you're not going to come to the table with evidence. And it definitely doesn't justify defending the continuation of these practices. If your whole argument is we should defend horse ownership because it might be hard to end it, then you have no argument. We should defend eating meat because it might be hard to end it. Pretty sure there are a lot more people who eat meat than those who ride horses. She may want to see good owners and good intentions everywhere. I think we all do, right? But the bottom line is she doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes. She cannot possibly know how this person is actually treating their horse.
Right, I completely understand that, but I'm judging it based off of the horse's body language in that video, okay? That's what I'm judging it off of. You guys are not judging it off of anything. So that's a really hypocritical statement to say, because you guys also don't know if that horse has a bad life.
You think that horse has a better life than he or she would in the wild? Because unless that's your claim, and I don't think it is, because again, she said that she thinks her horses would be better off in the wild, unless that is her claim, it is irrelevant to the position that horses should not be born into captivity. The practice as a whole is wrong. Anyone endorsing that practice is wrong, especially those like Raleigh who believe horses would be better off in the wild. Much of horse ownership is a privileged minority, right? Much like tiger ownership. You don't have to change the hearts and minds of diehard horse owners, right? You just have to work on everybody else, the vast majority of people who don't own horses, and convince them that this is a tradition that needs to die. This is something we've seen over and over and over again.
Oh my God. First of all, no, horse ownership is not a minority. There's more than 2 million horse owners across the United States, and most of those people own multiple horses. So no, it's not a minority.
There are about 328 million people living in the US. 1% of 328 million is 3.28 million. 2 million, which is how many horse owners Raleigh says there are. 2 million, quite a bit less than 3.28 million. So, horse owners represent well under 1% of the total US population. If that is not a minority, I truly don't know what is. There are more vegans living in this country. Does that mean vegans are not a minority? We did it, guys! Yes! And what does owning multiple horses have to do with anything? Does she think that the more horses you have, the more, like, ballots you get in elections or something? Like, you get to vote the number of horses you have? Contrary to what Trump might have you believe, pets cannot actually vote, including horses. In terms of electoral power, there are over 200 million adults living in the US. So even there, just considering adults, horse owners still represent less than 1%. There are more adult vegans living in this country. It's funny, but I mean, again, I think it shows she's just not incentivized to look into any of this. She hears me say minority and it feels wrong to her, so it must be wrong, even though clearly 2 million it's a big number. but in context, it's a tiny, tiny number. So yeah, it makes no sense to criticize those of us advocating for abolition because horse owners won't like it. Sorry, you're a tiny, tiny group of people. You don't matter. We just have to convince a portion of everyone else, and horse ownership could absolutely be banned, whether horse owners like it or not.
And on top of that, I'm not out here trying to convince the general public. I'm out here trying to educate other equestrians into treating their animals better and more ethically so they have a better life.
That's fine, but that's not who I'm talking to, and I don't think that's who that vegan teacher is talking to. We're talking to the general public. We're not expecting to change the hearts and minds of equestrians. Her activism is, trying to reduce abuse. We are promoting abolition of the industry. They're both worthy causes, in my opinion.
You cannot just ask for the demise of an entire industry. That's not something that you can just ask people for because it's never going to happen.
I don't think she has a crystal ball, and the stats she presented trying to intimidate us with the power of the equestrian lobby are pretty uninspiring. Maybe she can't come out with that ask because it would be, poorly received by her demographic. I'm sure it would be, but that doesn't mean we can't. And it doesn't mean that she's doing good by attacking activists who are appealing to a different demographic. Ending horse ownership just by the numbers looks like pretty low-hanging fruit, like trophy hunting or fur or SeaWorld.
The only option is to return all horses to the wild, which is just ridiculously stupid.
Why? You can't just claim that something is stupid.
It's stupid because I've gone over all of the organizations that have been fighting for the last several decades to keep wild horses around. Again, people, we only have 33,000 wild horses left in the US alone, okay? And they are being captured and slaughtered by the thousands. There might be 60 million horses, but guess what? We can barely keep 33,000 of them on natural public lands. Nobody wants their horse to go back into the wild and then see their horse end up in some person's dog food a week later.
This is the same thing anti-vegans say about animal agriculture. They set up some absurd and unrealistic scenario and then conclude that, well, we just all have to keep eating meat. There's such a thing as gradual reform, like banning breeding first so that we're not dealing with those types of numbers when it comes to ending ownership entirely. And in terms of the BLM, in a world where we have the political will to ban horse ownership, I think we would be able to end the BLM's mass extermination campaign, if that were actually a thing, which it's not. We can probably approach wild and rewilded horses the same way that we're starting to approach deer and other wild animals. A mostly hands-off welfare approach, right? Providing basic care like vaccinations to reduce disease and preventing unsustainable population explosions. Obviously, the detail and implementation of these policies would have to be informed by professional ecologists and careful impact study. Dismissing these alternatives with straw man arguments does nothing to support her claims.
Maybe you should be advocating for the wild horses we have. It's funny that she's over here advocating for all of these domesticated horses when probably a good 60 to 70% of them do have a good life, which is a low percentage, which is why I'm here and I'm trying to help that other 30-40% have a better life because there are a lot of uneducated people that own horses. But you need to be advocating for all of the wild horses that are being killed in mass numbers today.
Even being very generous and accepting her numbers, 30% of 20 million, she says there are probably 20 million horses in the US. I think that's a lot more than there actually are. I looked into it a little bit, but assuming she's right, 30% of 20 million is bigger than 100% of 33,000, like a lot bigger. Like almost 200 times bigger. But she thinks less than 1% of a population isn't a minority, so it's not surprising. It's not ridiculously stupid. It's an important question of philosophy and ecology. I think brushing it off like that only reflects her ignorance of both issues.
Wow, I don't know that all the wild horses, we can barely sustain them on natural public lands because they're being slaughtered by the thousands. I don't know that, right? I don't know, horse body language to understand what a horse is thinking and feeling. I don't know proper horse care. I have no experience at all to be speaking on this. I don't know the best outcome for horses. You know what? She knows because she's saying that we should just relinquish all horses to the wild. There's no other solution, even though her solution means that every horse relinquished to the wild is going to be slaughtered and killed.
I'm not saying that, number one, but also she hasn't presented any evidence in all of her attempts at logical arguments, she says she's a logical vegan, are fallacious, are based on misinformation, or are just mathematically inept. It's not clear how exactly we handle this situation, the situation we've gotten ourselves into regarding captive horses. Nor has it been clear how to handle the resolution of a number of moral atrocities throughout history. Clearly, some have been ended in less than ideal ways. It may even end up being true that breeding itself has to be ended in stages for optimal outcome. But that alone is not an argument for the indefinite perpetuation of the industry. And it's certainly not an argument for attacking those of us who are just trying to be consistent with our moral values and are only trying to inform people of the inherent problems in this kind of relationship, ownership, and exploitation of another feeling, thinking, living being for no good reason. To wrap this up, I find it interesting how different Raleigh is when she's like addressing that vegan teacher and now me, versus like this video where she's addressing people who are like literally abusing horses. Even though these people, they're whipping their horses, they're forcing them into a dangerous situation for views, as she says, she remains calm and understanding. It's really great. Honestly, it's a really good video.
I'm super concerned for all of the people who post stuff like this because I get it, right? Like they're just trying to make a name for themselves. They're just trying to get attention and get their name out there and maybe have a social media career, which, I mean, to be honest, guys, not that great. And it's definitely not worth risking your horse's safety and your safety.
But when it comes to me and that vegan teacher, people who are saying riding horses is unethical, or in my case, maybe riding horses is unethical.
Oh my fucking god, bitch. Oh my god. Ren Hurst. Oh my god. Let's go find her on YouTube. I'm sweating. I'm so aggravated right now. I'm literally sweating. This is one of the dumbest ladies I've ever reacted to ever.
Could it be that in the first case, like her position, her lifestyle is not being questioned? She doesn't treat her horses this way, so it's easy for her to be calm and collected when responding to it. In the second, we are directly questioning her lifestyle, something that is obviously very important to her, and it pisses her off. I just don't see the value, honestly, in hearing about the ethics of horse riding, horse ownership, horse breeding from someone who, one, can't handle a simple discussion on the topic without getting angry, and two, would obviously be very upset if she could not own and ride horses. Just like I probably wouldn't listen to like the ethics of keeping cats outdoors from someone with a bunch of outdoor cats who doesn't want their cats inside because they don't want their furniture scratched up and pissed on. Like, you know, probably not too interested in what you have to say. You have a pretty big incentive to keep your cats outside. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. You know, I don't hate Raleigh or anything. I think this is just an area where she really can't be objective on. Again, I've watched some of her other videos and I think they're really good, and she's obviously very knowledgeable when it comes to certain things, you know, regarding horses and horse ownership, and I like that she is exposing the abuses going on, especially these like viral videos on TikTok and shit like that. And obviously she has the ability to acknowledge when she's been wrong or hasn't you know, understood an issue. She opens this video saying that there have been times where I don't know exactly what she's talking about, she wasn't specific, but she said she's made videos about topics that she didn't really understand and she made mistakes, and so she doesn't do that anymore. So obviously she can admit when she's wrong, and that's really great. But yeah, maybe not when it comes to horse riding. That's okay. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Patreon, support the channel at Patreon. Subscribe, of course, and the bell, the little ding ding. Click the bell. Does it make a ding ding sound when you click it? OnlyFans. I have an OnlyFans. No naked stuff. I just talk about, you know, whatever I want to talk about. I have an Amazon store page, affiliate links to stuff I like. And I have some shirts. I have a couple shirts as well. Again, thank you, and I should have a new video very soon. Went upstairs to get a new battery, and my 4-year-old insisted I wear this to protect me from falling screws, I think is what they said. So it's like a kid's hat, but it actually kind of fits me, which is very flattering because I think I have a pretty big head. I mean, I know I have a big forehead, so like, hey, all right, it's this small. I'm not even gonna put all this in the video. I'm just gonna randomly have this hat on. Oh, this lipstick is so good. I don't need more lipstick. I don't know why I bought this, but I really wanted to try that Bite brand. And so I bought this little pack of these like neutral pinks, and they're all perfect for me, which is crazy. Usually like summer, like the lighter pinks look real weird and on me, but all these colors are just beautiful and they're so comfortable and they stay on really well. I often have a problem with lipstick, like non-matte lipstick, because it starts to like bunch up around kind of like the inside of my lips. And these do not do this. I've been wearing this for like 2 hours now and it still looks and feels great. Like it's smooth, but like dry enough so you don't feel like if you accidentally touch anything, there's just gonna be lipstick everywhere, you know? Man, seriously, I love these. Ooh, and I love that they're like small little pencils. That's way easier for me to put on. I hate the traditional like lipstick shape. I just have, I don't know, I have a really hard time with it. So yeah, man, I really cannot speak highly enough of these little things. And look how cute! They're so cute!